Hi, everyone. Welcome to the xAPI cohort. I'm Karen Gleason with the Guild. I hope I'm welcoming you. We're going to have week 2 coming along, and it'll be super great. While we're getting ready for everyone to bop into the room here, I want to remind you we're going to do some quick check ins, and that'll be in the last 10 minutes of our session today. And we want to see what kind of project ideas you have. If you have any new teams, if you have anything currently in the works, if you have any questions, if you think, hey, I have an idea for a team, let me come on stage, talk about it, and see if anybody wants to join me. I know we're doing that in Slack as well, but we're going to have an opportunity during our live session today. So, I welcoming you, and I have two people who said they want to come on board or come on stage here and tell us about their projects or ask questions or whatever. Do a check in. So if you want to do a check in, find me up in that people tab and private message me and say, hey, Karen, I want to be part of that. And then I will bring you on stage and you can start your camera and your microphone and talk about your team. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to our host, Nadine Gilfillan, and I'll be off camera and off stage, but I will be here. Over to you, Nadine.
Well, hi everyone. Welcome to our session today. It's time to stop thinking that xAPI is a replacement for SCORM, and Chad is going to be talking about that. We'll come back to that in a minute. But I'd like you to look ahead on your calendars and think about some upcoming events. Karen's also going to put the information in the chat area for you so you can link to it. The first one is DevLearn in October, and if you get your registration in by September the 8th, you can save $100 on that particular event. Looking a little further ahead to the xAPI party coming up in November 2nd at 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific, so you can share all of your work with your cohort peers, and that could be really exciting for you to learn from each other as well. And then the last thing is to sign up for a free Learning Guild membership and get access to all of the live and on-demand learning resources that we have available on the Guild website, which can really contribute to your professional development. So I'm going to just pop back here to, oops, wrong slide. To this slide and introduce you to Chad Udell, who is the Chief Strategy Officer with Float and SparkLearn. And Chad, welcome to the session today. Could you please just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you very much. Hopefully everybody here can hear and see my lovely visage on the camera. My name is Chad Udell. I do have some intro information here in my presentation, and I'm always happy to come and speak with my friends at Learning Guild. I'm going to be heading to DevLearn certainly, but I've also got a presentation with the Digital Learning Summit that's coming up here in the fall too. So love to be here with the Guild always.
Great, Chad, and the screen share is all yours.
Perfect. Let's do this. I see that we've got quite a few attendees here, and I see a lot of people filing in from a number of different locations. Some obviously here in the U.S. Got some friends from Grand Rapids showing up in there. Hey, Eric. And I see some people here from the U.K. as well. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be. Thanks for joining us as part of the xAPI cohort here, which is a great seasonal, I guess, event, if you will, or a series of events that's been going on for some time now. And I have been very fortunate to participate in a couple of them and have a lot of love for xAPI. So today we're going to talk about some items within xAPI that we would like you as newbies, if you will, to start thinking about in order to be able to push your learning initiatives forward at your organization. So let's talk a little bit about that. I will give a bit of a history lesson, if you will, kind of talk about some of the origins and some of the limitations that we've seen. I do know that Jeff Batt in his presentation last week covered some of that, so we won't drain it. We won't take a lot of time. Just want to make sure that we're kind of setting the stage for why this part of the conversation is so important, especially for people that are just dipping their toes in the xAPI world. So let's take a look As mentioned, my name is Chad. I am Chief Strategy Officer at Float and SparkLearn. I've been doing digital learning, digital design, gaming, a variety of things for quite some time. And a lot of them has focused around education, kind of more from a non-traditional perspective. While I've done quite a bit of instructional design and my fair share of e-learning courses, I've always kind of just approached things from a little bit of a different angle. And that's pretty evident in my 3 books that I've written in this space here, Learning Everywhere, Mastering Mobile Learning, and Shock of the New. Through that journey, I've been very fortunate to own and operate Float, but also our most recent endeavor, which is SparkLearn, a learning experience platform focused on the mobile and deskless worker. So a lot of the things that I share is a result of that professional experience and my history in the space. And I am old enough to remember some of the very first endeavors that I made into SCORM. I think it was actually an e-learning module related to safety and ergonomics for a company that makes big yellow tractors. If it's any importance to you, the reason I think it stuck in my head was it was not easy to do at the time, right? We were talking about early 2000s. We were still writing a lot of our stuff in direct in ActionScript in Flash. And there weren't any of these fancy tools that made some of these things so easy. And really at that time as well, so many things that we take for granted were just kind of a glimmer in everybody's eye, if you will. Web services really hadn't come to fruition. The concept of RESTful interfaces, web services, rich internet applications, or JavaScript being used for the entire UI layer for material was just kind of highly conceptual at that point. Right? There were no real practical concepts of microlearning, mobile learning, that type of thing. In fact, I do believe it was actually like maybe 4 or 5 years post this that the domain mobilelearning.com got registered by Robert Gadd. Hi, Robert, if you're out there. He was one of the early people, I think, espousing some of the shortcomings of SCORM, because as we know, at that time, really, these were what you could do in a learning module. These were the things that you could be expected to be, compatible with your learning management system or with your activity provider, as it were, your courses, things of that nature. And these are the things that you spent a lot of your time debugging. Like, why didn't it commit? Why isn't it resuming? Why can't I get the status data and be able to understand where the learner should be in their course? Of course, then that means that none of these things really were on the table for our, endeavors. Like, these were not things we could really adequately represent either in digital data streams or analytics, or even offer to our learners as an opportunity of areas that they could learn. Now, there are a variety of platforms that are SCORM compliant that do some of these things, but what I will say is most all of them are bending the specification, the legacy specification of SCORM, to a modern expectation of what we should be doing. So any of those items, like whether it be offline learning, mobile learning, social or informal learning, if you are hand jamming that data into SCORM, please know that your learning management system or your vendor is doing you a favor. They're doing you a solid by doing that. But any of that is actually outside of the spec and technically not really SCORM compliant, and could be taken away basically at a moment's notice if a web browser changes their specification, or if a mobile application vendor stops supporting a specific area of their software development kit or API. Those types of things could go away. Regression testing, errors downstream, those all become a problem. And so I saw just alarm bells. As a web designer, web developer, I was like, this is terribly limiting. And I remember going into a session at a conference. The session was hosted by some folks from Rusticy Software. Tim Martin was actually the presenter, and he shared this video, which shows this concept of the noun verb object and the progression of a variety of different actors through a number of learning activities with the result sets. And if you'll notice, sometimes they're people, sometimes they're groups, sometimes they're associations, Sometimes they're digital learning activities. Sometimes they're offline activities. Sometimes they're exercises that take place at an Army base, right? Sometimes it's about reading a book. Almost none of these are LMS-like activities. And when I saw Tim present this, it really was, it was life-changing for me. You know, I was looking at my career as an instructional designer, someone that was creating learning, as being pretty limiting. Like I was going to be stuck inside of an LMS and I was not going to be able to connect with my learners and my audiences in ways that were meaningful and that reflected where technology was going. Around this time, the iPhone was just getting going, like was very, very exciting. The iPad had just been released. Apps were starting to hit. And I thought, if I want those types of content, those types of activities, those types of experiences to be reflected in a corporate learning infrastructure and be able to be equal rights citizens, if you will, digital citizens, along with the learning content that we were all familiar with, I needed to do something. I needed to push the envelope and I needed to create some new stuff. And just so happens that there was a lot of activity going on around this time. Photos here on the screen. I think this one on the left is probably taking place somewhere in Alexandria, I would imagine, outside of Washington, D.C. See some familiar faces in here, whether it be Andy Johnson from ADL. He's the one in the front there with that orange shirt. I see Aaron Silvers in the back. I see Chris Rockwell. I see the Hariska brothers there, Mike and Nick. All of these were some of the folks that were on the very early stages of xAPI. In terms of writing the spec, creating these items, and helping us move from this courseware-laden, very heavy formal learning, WBT type of thing, web-based training type of thing, into something that's more akin on the right, which was actually an Arduino, a software hardware hybrid item that could be basically connected via web services to a flight simulator. And then that flight simulator could have data represented in a learning record store. So simulations and things of that nature suddenly became possible as soon as you could bridge non-web browser experiences and start to send those activities into the LRS. They were clearly not replacing SCORM at this point, right? We were clearly looking at the standard as something that put us beyond just the e-learning course. And this is really some exciting stuff. Yeah, I see this. Speaking of heavy, there's some thick laptops. Yes, there are those. They might be nuclear launch workstations. What I did very quickly after I got out of some of these working groups and saw this was I worked with my team at Float to build a social network for learning. It was called Tapestry. For a brief period of time in 2012, it was on the charts on Apple's App Store. And the thing that was different about this was it was a social network specifically for social and informal learning experiences. Everything that took place and transpired in this application generated an xAPI statement of some kind. And there was not a single e-learning course anywhere in the application. If you posted a learning experience, it generated an xAPI statement. If you upvoted it or downvoted it or commented on it or rated it or browsed it or set a goal in the future, I will do this. You could later then complete it and say, I did do this. So there was like a really kind of neat arc in terms of self-directed learning and kind of charting the future. So if it's not abundantly clear from the very beginning, as soon as I saw xAPI, I did not see this as a replacement for SCORM. The last thing I really wanted to do was try and strap on a bunch of new syntax and protocols and things of that nature to debug inside of some learning modules when mostly that stuff was already working, right? SCORM was already basically working at that point. Of course, you have some, vendor discrepancies. Sometimes if you're onboarding a new LMS, you might have to re-output some of your courses so that the statements work properly and stuff. But by and large, those problems have been fixed. I'm not interested in fixing or solving problems that have already been fixed. I've always been interested in trying something new or something different. And I think now, 10 years on from the ratification of xAPI 1.0 standard and where we are with it, it's interesting to see that most of the discussions that I see when I go out to events still result in, do you support xAPI? And you're asking that question of an LMS, or you're asking that question of an e-learning courseware creator. And of course, at this point, the answer is yes. They're probably supporting tin can APIs, XML format. I think there was some stuff in the cohort chat a couple days ago where Brian Miller brought that up, and then we moved some of that discussion into the discuss-CMI5 channel. But really what we didn't get, or what we haven't seen, is a push to use xAPI for upskilling and reskilling data, for simulation and immersive learning, for AR and XR, for creating behavior flows like what we're seeing here on the right-hand side of the graphic. We want better data, better analytics in order to be able to provide better insight, recommendations, and decision-making tools for our organizations. If we are not using xAPI data to push us beyond what was already available to us at SCORM, all we are doing is asking for a bigger budget to spend more money on new shiny toys. And that is basically my point of view for almost everything. The technology needs a reason to exist. It needs to be able to push the ball further in order to justify its spend, right? We all have limited budget, limited resources. Would you rather hire somebody new? Would you rather get a new expert in data and analytics? Or would you rather spend money on upgrading all your e-learning courses so that they can generate xAPI statements that are basically identical to your SCORM statements from 10 years ago? And from a budgeting perspective, from a resourcing perspective, from a growth and expertise perspective, I hope that we're all ready to move past that and take a look at all of the types of things that happen inside of the apps and the tools and systems that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. If you take a look here at the the screenshot, the mocked up screenshot of this learning application, almost nothing in a mobile learning application, nothing in a performance support or learning experience platform is a course. Almost nothing in these systems should be represented by a SCORM statement. Almost all of them are engagement metrics, much more like working with a web page, much more like working with a Google Analytics platform. We're concerned about, did they look at the emergency preparedness page? Did they review the onboarding packet? Did they highlight anything in it? When have they reused it? Where did they pause a video? Did they share the employee manual? Did they complete the checklist? And then last, and certainly not least or less important, is, did they go through the course? Did they take the quiz? Did they pass the assessment? But all of the other tools that you put out in front of your learners have just as much importance as initializing a course and taking a test. So if you look for what we're talking about from an engagement metrics perspective, these are represented in software as a service products across the board, whether it be, what they're abandoning, if they're abandoning shopping carts, if they're abandoning a session, if they're leaving 15 seconds into a video as opposed to watching the full 3 minutes, what is their overall return rate? What is their social share and their value to the network? And what's their overall engagement? None of these use cases here should be represented using SCORM 2.0, aka xAPI as SCORM. These are all new types of ways that you interact with the content, whether that be providing feedback on content, searching or browsing inside of a social tool or a performance support tool, annotating or highlighting content, following an adaptive learning path so you can see your path through a learning journey or a course, interacting with an AI or a chatbot that might be embedded inside of your system. And some of the other things are related more to, I guess, if you will, engagement metrics akin to interacting with websites, right? And also, as AIs and the agents get increasingly more intelligent, we can start to apply those tracking tools to them as well. So we can track the system's internal activity. When did they deliver a content recommendation? When did they recommend a specific search query as opposed to the one that the user entered in with a typo? Those types of things. The effectiveness of the entire system as a whole is what we're talking about. The interesting thing here is when you look at the heritage of xAPI, Where it originated from was JSON, JavaScript Object Notation activity streams, which is available still online at activitystree.ms. There was a brief period of time, like around 2010, 2013, where people thought it was really cute to turn words into URLs. Just made it very hard to actually say the URL, activitystree.ms. This overall standard, which is depicted over here on the left-hand side, could be used to represent activity of all sorts inside of a system, not just learning activities, but anything that takes place or transpires inside of a customer relationship management system, for example, a social network, even a media creation and management tool. This one here is, I think, Martin Smith posting an image to a photo gallery called myfluffycat.jpg, right? And so when you think about how anything that we do inside of a system can be represented as an activity stream, when you think about how you may want to represent that in a learning related activity, there's no real benefit to saying Chad passed a test on entering orders rather than Chad entered an order inside of a test, right? So the context, the other subtle pieces of the xAPI statement is really where it adds value, and where then you can actually do a one-to-one correlation between the xAPI statements issued by your system and the systems or tools or processes that you are trying to train on and assess. Now, I want to show you from a historical point of view here what we did. I believe this is it. This was about 10 plus years ago. In Float, we wrote this cartoon in order to help people understand how xAPI statements could be used in non-learning systems. And so this is a journey of, I think, Bob. Yeah, he just got hired to work in logistics and distribution at Megacorp. That's my standby name for a false, company. And we take a look at the xAPI statement here. This is something that would take place in a human resources information system. It looks like Bob, for the inbox of bob@megacorp.com, has been hired, right? And he's hired in a job. He's new hire. He's working in logistics and distribution. And specifically, his position is order processing. There's all kinds of activities that then take place inside of a variety of systems. You got hired, you're being onboarded by your training supervisor. That's going to take place in the LMS, and it has an accompanying statement. But then there's other ones. This one here is taking place in the LMS. This one here is actually taking place in a supply chain management software, say, for example, like a SAP system. So Bob is currently hindered in his efficiency because he canceled the wrong order and then processed the canceled order. This particular statement then would send a message to the LRS, which lets the manager know that in the LMS, they should be retaking the training. You'll notice here the common thread is it's Bob, it's Megacorp, it's the activities that he's doing in work, and it's all being reflected in the same data standard. Now, this is not fiction, and you can see this for yourself when you take a look at any of the systems or tools that you typically are training on, whether it be an order entry system, a POS, point of sale system, could be a customer relations system, picking, packing, and logistics system. Any and all of the activities that are in there, if the system is cloud-based and has an API, which is about 98% of all software at this point, it's going to have some form of an activity stream that you can click into, that you can view, that you can look at. And I'll prove that to you by showing you, this is the JSON activity streams articles. I'll post these links in the cohort chat later. Here's the specification on JSON activity streams. Here's the 2.0 version, which was last reviewed on 2017. But taking a look just for simple article here, Salesforce has an activity stream API. HubSpot has an activity stream API. Jira has an activity streams API. And a good old article here, I think was it written by Brian Miller? I bet it was. is how to correlate job performance with training specifically around the concept of activity streams. So this is not new information. This has definitely been around for some time. I think it's just now finally starting to hit people's radar because the APIs, cloud systems, and software are so widespread and prevalent at this point, that it's almost inescapable, really, when it comes right down to it. All right. So what's exciting about this, from my point of view, is not just that the data can be gathered, but the data can be gathered in a uniform way. Okay, so from an advanced metrics, analytics, and profiles perspective, I got a couple screenshots here. How are you going to keep your data clean and normalized? If it's Wild West and you can choose a verb and you can choose a noun, you can choose your object, how are you going to have any level of standardization around it so that you can report on it? Well, the concept is xAPI profiles, formerly known as tin can recipes way back in the day. And pictured here on screen is the xAPI profile server, which is maintained by Torrance Learning, I believe. This is on xAPI. And then also this is showing the performance support profile. So if you think about building a mobile application for performance support, obviously you've got use, search, browse, review, reuse, duration, how long were they inside of the application, so on and so forth, what commonly gets queried and stored and saved and bookmarked. And you have to have a companion visualization tool that works with it. Veracity, a great LRS, one that we've been partnering with for some time, does support these types of profiles, performance support specifically. So you can jam SCORM data in there using CMI5 and all that kind of good stuff. But if you tailor your output using a profile that is non-CMI5, you are opening the door for a whole world of new, more robust reporting that will show you data more like what you get outside of the learning world and more like what you get inside of the line of business softwares that obviously get much larger budgets, right? I mean, the budget for buying a CRM or a ERP system is always going to be larger than a learning management system. Now you say, Chad, of course, that's what allows the business to do their work. But it also is the fact that the company, the product on that other side, CRM, ERP, supply chain management, generates a tremendous amount of data that is valuable to the enterprise. Not just the work that is done by the workers, but also the exhaust, all the signals of how these systems interact with each other. By us moving to a standard that is more flexible and more closely reflects activity streams that are in the rest of the enterprise, what we are doing is creating a wealth of data that is far more valuable than just assessment scores. Okay. And if you are interested in this, oh boy, do I got something for you. In September, the Data Analytics online conference that the Learning Guild is hosting has a lot of great sessions. One of them in particular is going to be Jason Hagg from Veracity and I together diving deeply into this particular topics. And Daniel, I see that you want to see some high-res screenshots. I'll be sharing this deck. You can look at this later. But I mean, actually, these are just screenshots of systems that are publicly available. For example, that xAPI profile viewer, you can just go to the xAPI website. You can see the live information, for example. The Veracity materials, for example, as well. I know that Jason and his crew have made the software available for trials for the cohort users. So screenshots are screenshots, but you can actually go use the software and see this stuff for real. Screenshots are only a static dead tree representation. You can actually interact with the software for no fees. So I do want to make sure that we have plenty of time for questions, Q&A. I hope, if nothing else, that this has awoken maybe a new point of view that the data that we can generate with xAPI doesn't have to be confined to an LMS and it doesn't have to be confined to courses, but rather can break out and can connect to our CRMs, our supply chain management tools, and all of the great tools that our colleagues work with. If this seems like a lot, that's fair, because it is a lot. But what I would say is start with one department outside of your learning and development folks. Go have a coffee with them. Ask them about their data. What are their KPIs? What are they tracking? What are they actually trying to move? How would you represent that data in an interactive exercise or an immersive training system or something, and not just simply create a test about that data, but rather create immersive exercises, calculators, tools, perhaps even drag and drop of a process diagram for order entry. So it's like got the 12 steps for order entry. All they do is they drag and drop them into the correct step, and then it's Chad completed an order in a simulation, not Chad passed the simulation, right? Does that make sense? So we want to make sure that we're framing our data and our data output and exhaust in the same way that the enterprise is, so that we can get that correlation. If you are interested and want to see more, you can always connect with me. Not to turn this into too much of a commercial at all, but our LXP actually generates 100 unique engagement metrics, all using xAPI. And we do support multiple xAPI profiles out of the box and work very nicely with Veracity. We've been doing this for some time. It's maybe easy for us in the sense that we do this at a high level with a lot of great businesses and customers. But the quote here from BizTone really says it all over for me is 10 years of trying will eventually make you look like an overnight success. It takes a while, especially when you're trying to shift from a mindset like SCORM into something completely different. So thank you for spending time with me today. What questions might we have here? I'm seeing some items in the chat, but it looks like Megan's been all over them answering them. Thank you, Megan. Q&A here. All right. One question from Steven. Do you think the reason xAPI has seen such slow adaptation could be that most companies simply don't have a need for such massive amounts of data for the types of compliance or safety trainings that they require employees to take? And I would say that when we frame the type of data that is provided from compliance or safety training, SCORM is probably adequate. You know, what I'm talking about and what was the common thread through almost all of those things in the presentation was it wasn't really compliance driven. It was all about deeper, more immersive, upskilling, reskilling, you know, those types of things that are much more in depth and require quite a bit more interaction and immersion than just simply checking the box that, yes, they took the OSHA ergonomics course. What about data protection? That's a question from Albert. I'm in Europe, and I believe the regulations here are stronger than in the US. Well, Albert, that is absolutely correct. GDPR and the associated legislation and risk management profiles that go along with that, as well as some of the other new legislation that we're seeing in states like California, do point the way to making sure that PII, personal identifying information, is secure and safe. There are a lot of ways that that type of information can be made secure and safe, whether that be how it is encrypted, how it's stored, how it's destroyed, but also things like how it's hashed or abstracted from the actual actors' names and identifying information. That's like almost like a whole 1 hour, 2 hour discussion plus unto itself. And to be quite honest, it's a little bit outside of my frame of reference and expertise. There are certainly some xAPI and PII learning data experts out there that would probably be worthwhile talking to. And I am not really quite one of them, to be quite honest. Abby gives a question here. Can you give an example of a conversation with a business leader outside of LXD training and development to discuss the relationship with KPIs and xAPI? Yeah, sales manager, right? What's the sales manager tracking against? Absolutely, there's the highest, or the rubber meets the road. Did they make their sales? Did they make their quotas? But there's all kinds of other indicating activities that most sales managers are probably tracking amongst their sales reps. How many calls did they have? How many outbound prospects did they reach out to? How many people did they have a meeting with? How many of those meetings did they get a second meeting or book a meeting from? Any of those other smaller items that are also data points that are being tracked against are all things that could potentially be represented in immersive activities, simulations, or other types of training exercises. And that's just in sales. If we think about, say, for example, quality assessment of an overall hygiene for a restaurant, right? Like, is it clean? Okay, well, there's all these, there's a baseline. Yes, it's clean, but there's all the other activities that actually take place behind it that maybe only a food inspector would see, right? And so are you making sure that you're verifying that the employee did all of the steps? Well, that could be put into a checklist, but the checklist is actually an xAPI statement generating. Chad made sure that there was a sanitization bucket and a water bucket and clean rags and this. Those are all things that can be potentially tracked, both in the system of record, whatever the operations line of business system is, but then also the hand-in-hand activity that they know how to do this. They know how to set up their workstation. Tammy has a question. xAPI statements to track use of ChatGPT within learning. I mean, I don't understand the depth of what the use case is, but if you're building an interface around ChatGPT, that's going to obviously be firing events off to the ChatGPT API. You can also be firing at that same time events to your LRS, right? So certainly could be taking place at the same time. Chad generated a prompt to send to ChatGPT. Here was the full prompt, something along those lines. Other questions, comments, concerns? If you felt that this was valuable, if you thought that this was a good use of your time today for the presentation, could you just give me a thumbs up or some other sort of reaction in the chat? That's awesome. I appreciate that very much. Thank you all. Doug Wilson has, where do you start your design process as a chat item? With the learner. What are their problems? What are they actually facing in their day-to-day? I like the GIF. Thank you, Harley. All right. With that, I think we're just about at time, right, Nadine?
And some people were asking about the recording for the first session. About 4 inches up on my screen, Karen posted a comment about that. The recordings are contained inside AirMeet, and eventually they do get posted on the Learning Guild website. I just really want to thank you today, Chad, for presenting your information. A lot of it's over my head because I really don't know a whole lot about xAPI, and I see that there are some beginners in the group as well. So hopefully people are going to get a little more excited and learn more about it and get more involved in xAPI. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen.
Yes, thank you. If you want to stop sharing, Nadine, I'll just share my screen because I had to make some changes.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about our check-ins here. So if you would like to check in with the group, and by that, what do I mean by that? Well, I want you to talk about your group. I want you to talk about your questions, your challenges, whatever you'd like about xAPI. I'm a beginner. Where do I start? We had Jeff Batt's introduction as to what it was. You can go into the schedule up at the top, go to week 1, it's watch replay. A few minutes after this one ends, you'll have the same thing where it'll be week 2. I just want to remind everybody that that one link that you received for today's session is valid for the entire cohort. You will use that same link. I did post a calendar invite in Slack that you can open up, put in your link, and save to your calendar, and there you will have it for each time. We don't email out individual calendar invites for each session. So looking at the screen, I have all these teams. These are all the teams that have started, which is awesome because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 teams so far. And what we would like you to do is to put team in front so that they're easy to find and you can go ahead and join them. Once you've created your team, you're like, I'm going to do xAPI Beginners Fall. That was just created while we were sitting here listening to Chad, which is really great. You want to go, I'm a beginner. Let's join the beginning team. And then when you go to create that team, post in main, hashtag main, I created this team. This is what we're going to do. Put your link in there, hashtag team, whatever it is, come join us. That hashtag team is clickable, and you can go to that team and join them on their journey here in xAPI cohort. So it's really, really exciting. Those are all the ones there. If you want, when you meet with your team, you're like, when am I going to meet with them? I got to set up a Zoom. No, 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 not at all, not at all, not at all. Go to the lounge, which is here in AirMeet. Once we end this session, you'll be put into the reception area. Up at the top, there will be lounge. Click that, and you have all these tables. They're all empty for right now, but go ahead and put there your team name. You can create your own table that you go to every single time. This is always going to be the team association's continuing learning. So create a table, name it that, and set up your meetings. You can come into the platform 24/7 for as long as the cohort runs. So if you're in a different time zone, meet when it's convenient for you. We also have discuss in the Slack workspace. Discuss AI and xAPI, discuss beginners, CMI5, whatever it is. You can also create discussion channels if you so wish. So please drop some questions in there. You might find in that discussion, hey, let's discuss about security. How about this? How about this? And then you figure out, oh, let's create a team. I'm sure there's other people who want to work on this with us. And then you can do that. Hashtag main, that's for general questions, team invites, announcements. You will see things there from me, from other members of the guild, and we are really hope that you are going to enjoy this cohort. We want you to get a lot out of it, but remember, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. So that's really important. To create a team or even view the new teams, you want to go up to the channels, you go to manage or create, go to create and you create your team, or manage, browse channels. And once you browse channels, there'll be a pop-up. And what you want to do is you want to sort by the newest channel because this Slack workspace is years and years old. And so the newest channels will be the ones that are created during this cohort. And you can look there. If you miss the main for whatever reason, or you're away from Slack for a week or so, but we want you to get together. We want you to join these teams, do some learning together, and discuss things because what you put in is what you're going to get out. And we really hope that you've enjoyed today's session with Chad. I know I did. I enjoyed Jeff's session. This is a great way to kick off cohort. Now it's up to do some work. Get in there and figure out things. Go and join the Storyline group and figure out how to do it in Storyline. Go join the Captivate group. Go join the beginner group and go, okay, where do we start? Well, these are some things that I found. Jeff gave us some resources that were available in the recording. You can look at those. He's had a list of different things for us to look at if we're beginners in xAPI. So with that, I want to thank Chad. I want to thank Nadine, our host, and I want to thank Megan Torrance, who's been answering a lot of questions and encouraging everyone in the chat, which we really, really love and really, really appreciate. Megan is one of our xAPI experts, and she used to run the cohort, and so we really appreciate the expertise that she brings to our cohort. If anybody has any questions, and not all the questions I see there. If anyone has any questions, you can certainly email me, and I'm putting my, as long as I typed it correctly, yep. I'm putting my email address in there, so feel free to email me or ask me on Slack. I'm in both places. I will get to you as soon as possible to answer. The teams are in Slack, Sam, so you do need to join Slack. When you got your first email after you registered on the Guild website, that first email that you got should have said, "Hey, welcome. Here is how you register for AirMeet, the platform we're using, and here's how you register for Slack." And so hopefully you have that information. If you don't have that information, feel free to email me and I will take care of it for you. I'm just scrolling up. There's another Karen. Does each lounge table have a unique link? Nope. Get to the outside on one of these live sessions. Okay, so what once we end, you're going to get put into the reception area. It's always here. It's persistent. The reception area is there. The schedule is there. You click your link, you're going to be brought into it. There's nothing to watch outside of these live sessions, but the lounge tables are there. You can go back and watch the recordings. You can also go through the chat from the previous sessions as well. So you could do that at 2 in the morning. You could do that at 6 in the morning. It doesn't matter. You can say to your team, "Hey team, let's meet Monday, August 14th, 2 p.m. Pacific," and go in there and go to a table or create a table that would be yours and rename it and call it whatever you want. That can be your table. There's ones that are blank currently for just people to network. I hope that answers your question. All right. No, you cannot download the recordings. Not only are the recordings here, we also post them on the Guild website and we post them on YouTube as well. And you're going to get an email from our marketing people about that as to how to access. And you should be getting that email weekly in terms of the recordings and everything. All right. Anyone else have any questions? We want this to be a good experience. And I know there's a lot we're throwing at you for xAPI and a lot we're throwing at you for Slack and AirMeet. So whatever. So we're just here to help you. So feel free to email me. And I think that's it. I hope I don't see any other questions. And so I am going to go ahead and end the session. You're going to go be put back out into the lobby. Go ahead and join. Get your tables together and your teams together. Yes, the tables are persistent. They're here whenever, they're just waiting for you guys. So have a good day, enjoy, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.